Magento Creative, partnering with the client to help fulfill their strategic growth, serving the world as an Adobe Gold partner and BigCommerce Elite partner. Magento, the code of commerce. This episode is sponsored by eWay Corporation, the partner of choice for technology, infrastructure, and enterprise-level digital solutions. An AWS Select consulting partner. eWay Corporation, forward together. All right, welcome to this fantastic episode of Talk Commerce. Talk Commerce, Commerce. I have Ben Marks here. Ben Marks with Shopware. Ben, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, Ben Marks. I'm with Shopware. And Brent, you can hire somebody to like do a nice little fancy fading intro. Oh,
But hey, if you listen to some of the other episodes, you'll see that the budget definitely fits the type of intros that I'm looking for. So I'm excited. You're just lucky I had Derek Harlick sing our intro song once, which was
wow.
very good.
Okay. Now I consider myself thankful that I got
Yeah,
the
look at
delay
episode
treatment.
4.
Episode 4,
It's very fun to watch.
A New Hope.
Yes, it is The New Hope. And Derek is a big Star Wars fan. So if you look at the video version of it, there's Star Wars memorabilia all over the wall.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Yeah, he is a fan.
Yes. All right. So let's get right down to brass tacks. We are here to talk about e-commerce, I think.
I hope. It's the only thing I'm good at, and that point is debatable.
I think I have no idea what you've done in the past. This is the first time we've met, but I think you're familiar with some of the e-commerce platforms out there, and I'm interested to hear more about Shopware.
Yeah, familiar. Familiar with many, fan of some. No, really, they think I'd say a lot of the platforms out there, certainly the ones that have been successful, they all have a purpose as a member of an ecosystem that helps people sell things and helps people buy things. So Shopware, where this fits in, if for those who aren't familiar, Shopware is a German company. So it fits in nicely in that if you think about the role that any kind of open source or even open core software fills in the e-commerce space, that's where Shopware comes in. So there's there's several different flavors. There's the free as in beer open source community edition that you just download. You can get it from GitHub. You download it straight from the website, and then that starter pack, if you will, that is a basis for the other offerings. So there's a professional edition which bundles in a little bit more functionality, and then there's an enterprise version that bundles in yet even more functionality. And then for the for essentially someone starting out, whether you're starting out at a just a truly aspirational level, or you're starting out and you want some of those professional features, both of those are available via a SaaS offering. So a Shopware hosted cloud version with some pretty firm guardrails around what you can do. So you can modify the system. You can basically change out the theme for those, and you can add to the functionality using integrations that are called apps. But the professional edition is available either in cloud or in a self-hosted or open hosted format.
All right. And so we all know that you used to be with Adobe and you helped build a fantastic community. And I think what I'm more interested in is how do we get back to that community? And do you think that community is going to exist in Shopware?
Well, I mean, I have to say I tend to shy away from too much direct comparison. I mean, I think the comparison's warranted because because of that shared DNA. PHP open source product, a lot of different offerings. It's suitable for a lot of different people. So you can be down here at a smaller scale, and then with Shopware, and you can grow all the way up to, and we have plenty of customers who are there at that 100 million plus annual revenue range. um so Magento, I think, was famous for having fit into a lot of into a lot of places, maybe even somewhere it shouldn't have, but that has everything to do with uh, timing, right? So the time was right when Magento came along. I mean, there had been this it wasn't really a product, but there was a platform before it called OS Commerce that demonstrated the viability of an open source e-commerce platform, and one that could get a community around it. And then from that community, you derive all of this um, you know uh, like multiplicative value, like self-reinforcing value. So ecosystem comes around, and if there's something that isn't there or missing, the ecosystem builds it, and you end up with integrations, you end up with tech integrations, you end up with really cool custom sites. I mean, and all of that in combination with an effective marketing machine. And I think you end up with this with a product, and more importantly, an ecosystem that becomes viable. So that's where I see Shopware as it exists today. It's super popular, and depending on the measurement, predominant in Germany, and then also has adoption in throughout the rest of the German-speaking countries, and then into the Netherlands, and even some penetration up into the Nordics. And there's a good ecosystem that is around that, right? And that's critical to Shopware success. I mean, the ecosystem platforms are much more important for the non SaaS versions, the non closed softwares like Shopify. And part of the reason I'm with Shopware is because I saw a potential, as I kind of see Magento as heading way further up market, which I think fits with where it rests inside Adobe. As Adobe Digital Experience is an excellent suite. Awesome, good time to print. Um, Adobe is an Adobe Digital Experience is an excellent like set of solutions for really especially big problems. And so that's kind of where I base that assumption that Magento is going to just tend to head in that direction. Now, I think Magento has plenty of life left in it as an ecosystem and as an offering, especially with the introduction of Hiva, which is a a front end developer experience initiative that kind of was born out of a guy named Willem Wigman in the Netherlands, and also kind of involving IntegerNet, which is a agency based in Germany. And I think from what I've seen so far, there's a lot of interest in that thing. And I'm bringing it up because it speaks to the kinds of things that the kind of space that I think Shopware occupies, which is like, if you can make it efficient enough to build something, then you end up with people being able to be in the business. You end up with all this money flowing around from agency to the developers, and then the merchants are benefiting, and the related vendors come in, like all the tech vendors and payment methods and tax calculation companies. All these players all come together, and you get all this exchange of value, money, services, whatever. um, and it becomes, I think, really becomes this kind of self-reinforcing thing. And that's what the opportunity is with Shopware. I think if we can get it in front of people around the world, because Shopware I think tends to have a shorter time to market. Like if you're building a solution, I think you can stand it up a little more quickly. I also think that the the level of development effort to build something on Shopware is pretty low. I mean, is it like absolutely as turnkey as like Shopify? Well, I think if you're comparing the SaaS versions, it can be. The question there is just what functionality do you need? But when it comes down to building like really custom experiences, custom themes, custom functionality, Shopware does pretty well. And we're doing some work right now to um, to test these assumptions to make sure that we're being forthright with all the people that we want to use Shopware.
Yeah, and I did meet both brothers at the Unconference in 2019, and now their
Nice.
name escapes me at the
The
moment.
Hum
But
the Hummin brothers, Stefan and Sebastian.
yeah, okay. And I was excited. I think Shopware 6 had just come out at the time.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really interesting that they joined a Magento Unconference and even put up they put up an issue or a problem that they wanted to discuss. So I think that lends something to the motivation behind their thought about community. And
Yep.
I am very interested in this sort of SaaS versus on prem, because I guess I can at some point, in some ways, I can see the difference in community, or why somebody wouldn't get on board with Shopify or something like that. But they do get on board with Shopware or Magento, or uh, in that spirit of community.
Yeah.
But if you, there is something there that isn't there with Shopify, be it whatever you're at, and I don't know, I can't quite put my finger on it yet.
Well, I think so. I mean, I'm not deep into the Shopify ecosystem. I mean, there are, we all have friends in common. An example that often cite. So I mean, you've got your Karen Bakers of the world, and Karen, who's gonna she and with her, under her leadership, the company Shipper HQ. I think as members of any platform ecosystem, they're great because they're always gonna they have like, here's the standard. They have their standard for how they think things should be. They are always trying to raise up the level of the partner environment in which they are. And then I think most importantly, will hold the platforms accountable for the things that they're saying and doing. If they say like, oh, we are XYZ, they'll say, well, they'll examine everything you do and say, are you really that? So in the Shopify ecosystem, I always look at things from an ecosystem angle just because of my history. But I think all the value for any shop system exists within its ecosystem. I mean, ultimately. So Shopify as a product delivers just a massive amount of ease of startup value and de-risking of TCO for like an aspirational merchant. And then as you get into any degree of customization, you're gonna involve tech partners, you're gonna involve agencies to customize the front end. And then it's a matter of like, how well are they enabled? What is the prevailing cultural sort of set of ideals? And it's just like any other ecosystem. It kind of depends on who you go with. So the standout example for me is Taproom Agency, which is run by a woman named Kelly Vaughn. And if you don't know her, her handle on Twitter is KVLLY. Yeah, Ms. Vaughn is just someone I started following a while ago because I saw her very actively, giving back to, engaging with the ecosystem, both in Shopify and then around development. Because which she relates to as a developer, and then and then also as a founder, she's building out in the open, And I think it's a fascinating example. Like me, I'm not so inspired to build stuff because, I'm just, I'm, I have the ideas, but I tend to not I tend to not follow through on execution with things like, what's the 10% of time? I mean, you've been running an agency for a while, and there's that 10% of time, that you that you and Susan have spent, like, you just doing the overhead, like paperwork and all that other jazz. So I think it's really fascinating to see all of this stuff happening. So there are great examples in the Shopify ecosystem, but if you step back, I mean, part of what makes an open source product ecosystem really special, and maybe kind of distinct, is that there's this sense, if it's done well, that the members of the ecosystem, they're looking around and they're like, hey, everything that we want this to be, it's like we have to make that. I mean, there may be people who come along, or newcomers, that come in, but if it's a healthy ecosystem, they're going to get a sense of those norms right away and realize, wow, it's not just enough to show up and do business with these tools. I need to invest where I can. I want to invest my time or partnership budget, or whatever inputs I can have into that ecosystem, because assuming that in kind of, investment is being met in kind around the ecosystem, then the whole thing raises up. I mean, one way to look at it, if you're just a cold hard economics or math type, is, IDC did a study of like the Magento ecosystem back in 2017, I think. Maybe even earlier, and they found out that the platform itself, was responsible at the time for like 155 billion in GMV. So, like, basically 155 billion dollars worth of merchandise was flowing through Magento code base, right? But then the IDC study was looking at how much is the economy, the service economy around the Magento ecosystem, and that was over 5 billion, right? So you think about it, it's a tremendous flow of money, in and around all these different vendors. And at the time, Magento's, like, was, making, had receipts of like 100 and, approaching $200 million or something a year. Be my guess. And that's a pretty it's a really, really small bit, of that pie. And that's what I really, really like about Shopware, is it's a similar thing where, like, our investments, and where we're, as I'm going out and making partnerships, partner deals, so to bring us to the US and other places, we take those partner dollars and invest them back into the ecosystem. Tell the partners, like, I'm not going, I want to make sure that you have enough budget left to sponsor just these ad hoc ecosystem events. I mean, a big strength of an open platform is that ability to just meet chaos with chaos, right? So, um, the completely unpredictable nature of, like, what needs to be built next, like, what's the next cool thing that commerce is going to impress upon, the shopping public? No idea, right? But, you know if it's going to be discovered, and if it's going to be invented, if there's going to be some kind of, ingenuity in that area, it's probably going to come out of open source world, because the SaaS platforms, they've got to play to their strengths. They got to play to the bulk of merchants. So when they release a feature, it's got to be somehow valuable for the bulk of, this massive average merchant. Which doesn't mean they can't do amazing things, like Shopify getting into the like fulfillment business. That's a baller move, and it's something that a smaller platform doesn't do directly. But I think, SaaS, open source, closed, open, hosted on prem, whatever it is, like, all of these things are converging. Like, SaaS wants to be way more flexible, and the really flexible open solutions want to provide the same kind of lower risk, more predictable TCO for merchants and agencies. So I think I just answered about 5 questions you didn't ask, but that's, well, you knew it was going to be like that when you got
No,
me on this
that was
podcast.
great. Yeah, just one comment on the gross value of that's going through Magento. It would be great to see a picture of that slide at Magento Imagine that started back in 2011, to see what that was and to see if they consistently measured it over time, over the last whatever 10 Imagines, to see if that slide went up and they had the same gross value. I know this is completely off topic, but it would be interesting to see the dynamics inside of those events that Magento put on, to see what that value was over time, to see if it tracked consistently, growing greater and greater. I'm sure it did at some point, because they got bought for a lot of money. But that is,
Well, I mean, I don't know. If you look at the purchase price and you figure, you hear me talking about, a $200 million, whatever. It's somewhere in that area. I don't know. I didn't have access to that information, but um, the Adobe purchase was basically 10x revenue. Okay, that's honestly not very exciting. That's
yeah,
that's 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 not that's not atypical. And they literally, I mean, with it, I think it was like 2 days, the stock price had gone up, and they literally paid for the acquisition with the increase in stock price.
yeah, but that's like 10x revenue of what Magento collects for their licensing fees. I was
Yep.
just talking about the amount of money that people were transacting through Magento. They always put that up as a big number that said, "Here's what it is," and it was a 1 billion, or and then it's
Yeah.
going to be,
The
100
challenge.
billion, and
Well, it's an interesting point though, because it's certainly relevant for something like Shopware, because that is an important figure. Now, each of the payment vendors, they tend to know, most of the payment volume going through them, and so they can say, um, they can assign some value to the partners, and that's why, PayPal was a great partner for Magento, is a great partner for Magento, and PayPal is a great partner for Shopware, um, because they have that perspective. But what we don't have is, we don't have that total TPV. I mean, any community edition site, or any kind of site that is not part of the cloud offering, it's hosted via the agency or the merchant team involved, and they know what their receipts are, and we don't. We only can make sort of inferential guesses about it, and um, the and that may be part of the attraction, but it's also, it would be really nice to know, because then we could more reasonably value what the platform's doing. It's a fundamental challenge of open source, that we don't necessarily have that direct relationship with everybody, but it's the nature of the business.
yeah. So as I unpack a little bit of what you said earlier, your five answer to my one question, it it seems like the reason for community around open source is the biggest one is around the fact that somebody has a voice in what they're doing, and it's a voice that directly impacts the piece of software that's running, not some external app that you can plug in or something like that.
Yeah.
Would you agree with
Well,
that?
I mean, so yes, I'd like to be clear that, I'm not saying, and I think you're also probably not saying, that doesn't happen in, like, SaaS ecosystems. I mean, I'm sure, Shopify doesn't get the success it has without listening to its market, listening to its partners, and same for BigCommerce. But yeah, it is the case that there is that sense of ownership and empowerment, ideally, that should exist in an open source commerce ecosystem, or open source product ecosystem, because at open source is, I'm saying this more and more these days, like, the most boring part about open source is the code, right? Like, the fact that it's open and you can contribute to it. I mean, it's really interesting, it can be really powerful, but much more important is how the company conducts itself. I mean, and Magento was actually quite lucky that there wasn't a suitable, like that the SaaS platforms were still, trying to play catch up, and that there was not a suitable, well organized company behind some other open source platform, commerce platform, because um, if you remember in the early days of Magento, it's like, what was you could contribute. So this was before Git even existed, kids, and long before GitHub made code contribution, open and collaborative, like, for everyone. So Subversion repository, and if you wanted to, it was read only for the public, and if you wanted commit access, you had to send a fax. You had to fax a contributor license agreement to LA, and then someone would, who didn't really, who it wasn't their day-to-day job, but they would eventually process it, and then you could fold code in, maybe. And that it wasn't even really until 2016, 2017, when the community engineering team was created, that Magento really had, I would call, a sufficient apparatus that, like commensurate with its ecosystem size to handle the contribution. But even still, there was a ton of contribution. I mean, it's a challenge of any open platform. If you're going to accept code contributions, if you're going to accept feedback, you're going to accept feature requests, like all of this stuff, you have to have someone, whose priority, whose job it is to actually accept that, to help, groom it and get it into the company, and then like get back to the people and say, like, oh, this is what has come of your code contribution, your feedback, your feature request. It is no secret that that's probably the most difficult thing, is remembering to tell people even the good news, like, oh, hey, got your feature request, like, this was really important, but we've got this done. How often is that loop actually closed by any company? I suspect it's not always. And so it's one thing to get yelled at for being radio silent. It's a whole other thing when you actually do all the work necessary to accept someone's contribution, and then you just forget to tell them about it. Wasted opportunity, and probably a mistake that will continue to be repeated as long as human beings are doing open source.
Yeah, and you're right. That wasn't that long ago that they did go on to GitHub and made it accessible to everybody.
Yeah.
And I can now remember. I mean, thinking back, I can remember when that happened, and that was pretty exciting. Um, all right, so I'm gonna just keep going back to the community thing here.
Do
Do
it.
you think it has to be a combination of top down to bottom up? Like, so the community's there and they're embracing this and they're bringing it up to management. And certainly in the beginning, what Magento did right is they brought the community together. I remember going out in 2010 or something, or way early in LA, and kind of meeting with Yoav. And
Yep.
there was at that time, there was a bunch of French guys in the community. I don't know if
Yep.
you must remember that.
Yep.
And they really embraced the community. And it was, I don't know if that was strategic on their part.
Yeah, well, no, it was. I mean, at least that's apparent to me. They realized the value of engaging with. So you had like Philippe Hermeux and some others in France who were putting together Bargento, putting together like the first Magento focus conference. Like, this just happened. And then Germany and the Netherlands also had Meet Magento kind of spring up around the same time. And so they realized that their ecosystem was it's I mean, kind of like, I don't know, probably kind of like, maybe it's dark, it's an unintentionally dark metaphor, but like black holes, like how do planets form? You have like a whole bunch of dust, like, just skimming around, and then all of a sudden, if enough of it gets close together, you get critical mass, you get gravity, and all of a sudden you get things coming together, and you have these like locusts that'll pop up everywhere, and all of a sudden you've got like these little cultural anchors. You have these little these value added drivers, these multipliers of your effort, of your, and then all you have to do is like, you home office, get the marketing right, you get the necessary, you make, maybe help with some of the connections, but you engage with them, you empower those people who are promoting your message, and that's really what it's all about. And I think that's something that I know I've been around Roy Rubin at a number of conferences and seen his ability to capture and retain information and then recall it, months later, and be able to just like top of his head remember names, remember what they were working on, remember how old their cat is, I don't know. And that is it's a phenomenal skill, but it speaks to showing people that their story is important, and more than just like a parlor trick. Like I suspect that was always the case. You could always see the feedback happening and being processed in real time in the Magento blog and Magento forums, and that's and a sign of a healthy open source product company is just how completely immersed the entire company culture is into the ecosystem that supports it, right? How much are the people inside the office, virtual or otherwise, how much are they thinking about the the end users, right? Which for commerce is a little, it's interesting because the end user is, in some ways, the customer is the agency, like in the developers implementing the customizations, like adapting the core product to the merchant. And then of course there's the merchant themselves and their customers. So you have this kind of, you have a couple of dimensions to consider, but like making sure that they're able to get their work done. That's and that when they have feedback, you are listening. And yeah, that's part of the magic of what happened, I think, in the early days, um, with Magento. And that's something that that resonated with me, like when I visited Shopware's community day in 2016, and met Sebastian and met the ecosystem and saw how warm and like and amped they were to do stuff and to participate, like watch the public be excited to meet the people behind the platform. Like it's a really neat thing to see, for people to be proud of, you know be proud to be part of something that you build. I think it makes, as an employee, it makes you even more proud of what you're doing, and hopefully impresses the importance of what you're doing on yourself.
And so now moving forward, is your role similar to your previous role with Shopware? Or are you doing a lot more than just evangelizing?
No, yeah, it's a lot more. And so my evangelism is certainly less. It is, before it was basically all of what I did. I mean, now evangelizing was actually much less about like, proselytizing, a platform. It was a lot more about connecting with people and doing some of the things that I was just talking about. Like I was able to go out and be with the people, building and using the platform and participating in the ecosystem, and help them have that touch, to the home base, but then also, making sure that they're, what was being created was meaningful and matter, and then introducing people to each other as well, making those connections out in the ecosystem. So what I'm doing now is, I like right now there is not a sufficient, there's not a self-sustaining level of business for Shopware outside of like a core group of countries in Europe. um, that, however, will not be the case for long, right? If I'm doing my job well, then then you you start to see Shopware stores popping up in different places than before, and you see businesses, excuse me, you see agencies doing this stuff. You see hosting companies getting involved. You see all of a sudden like Shopware's listed with all the same tech partners that you know, and just kind of out of nowhere, you got that accretion, and hopefully we get enough that we get that critical mass in several different markets, and we'll have self-sustaining business, and I'm excited about it because I think I think the world deserves Shopware. um and whereas I see Magento kind of moving up, combined with the Magento 1 end of life, there's a whole host um of merchants out there, merchants and brands that need a new home. And for a lot of like the really early Magento 1 adopters that have just been there for so long, I hope a lot of them roll off to probably like WooCommerce or Shopify or BigCommerce. It's something that hopefully can be a little bit more easily like self-sustaining for that ultra small merchant. But for a lot of the merchants that need some level of customization or integration, basically just they need something that they're not going to get very easily from a SaaS platform, then my goodness, yeah, hopefully we'll be the thing for them. Why that's exciting is I think we stand a chance to create a lot of opportunity for people to to build businesses, or at least add on to the lines of business that they have, and um, and that will be that'll be a like a springboard for whatever's happening next in the land of custom custom e-commerce experiences, right? Because I'm pretty much convinced that development in 3 or 4 years time, and also like the marketplace's attitude and perspective towards software, it's going to be very, very different from where it is now. And I just want Shopware to be in a position to be part of that, um, to be part of that future, like to be able to help shape where things go. Because again, I think all the innovation happens in the open source world, and I want this industry to stay interesting and not be not be so cookie cutter.
Yeah, and it's very exciting. Vinay is on board with Shopware. Isa Reitz, a lot of the people that the names that would ring true for Magento, they're doing both, and I think that lends lends a big degree of favor towards Shopware. I think it's exciting too that there's a SaaS platform available, because I think just briefly talking about those guardrails, merchants need guardrails, just like infants need a crib, or a little playpen, or a
Yeah.
puppy needs to have some restraints on what they're going to do. Otherwise, they're going to run around and chew up everything in their sight. And I think too, the idea of having a SaaS for somebody that really all they would like to do is sell something, and they want to just get it out the door. But then they've been introduced to something that can do everything,
Yep.
and they suddenly see somebody wanting or doing something, and they want that.
Yep.
And I know for us, we had for a while we had Universal Music, which was 1,000 stores with 1,000 customers, with an artist manager who was told by the artist that I would like my store to do something, and I like this. And they didn't necessarily care if UMG was going to pay the bill for that or not.
Yeah.
All they did was give some VP pressure to get what they wanted. And
Yeah.
if the answer was yes, it can do this, then yes, I want that. I don't care how much it costs. And then the pressure on the agency is, well, yeah, we can build that, but that's going to be $60,000 or whatever the price is. And there's like not going to be return on that for that. When they switched, and just for full transparency, UMG bought a Shopify agency in Philadelphia.
Huh.
So anyways,
Huh.
the idea then is, well, no, you can't do that. Here's what you can get. All right,
Yeah.
I guess that's what I can get. I'll take it.
Well, yeah, I mean it's an interesting use case, and I mean maybe the argument could be made, just because you can customize something doesn't mean that you should. You do have to look at like the both the viability in the short term, or the reasonableness of it in the short term, and the viability just long term. If you're, especially if you're trying to maintain, what should be as a set of like 1,000, homogeneous instances. If you start coming up with any kind of deviation or exception there, I mean, forget it. That's, that, yeah, yeah. I'm glad I wasn't. I think when I was in the agency world, we never had a client that was so prone to whimsy. That's a tough client to keep satisfied. But I do think that when when reasonable, you should build that distinct, that uh, unique customer experience. I mean, it's the engagement from brand to consumer just continues to be, at the one, more and more personal, but also in a lot of ways, depending on your industry, can be really decentralized. And the touch may be from, Facebook, Twitter, anywhere in social media, Snapchat, Instagram, and there's some touch there. There's targeted ads in other contexts, and that these ad campaigns can hit a prospective customer from several different angles, or even a repeat customer from several different angles, and then they just happen to hit at the right time, in the right context, with the right tone. And these are interesting problems to solve for. I mean, and this is why huge brands, they want to solve this with really big, really connected, data informed applications, like well, I mean, like that's where like the Adobe digital experience value prop comes in, right? Because they have this huge stuff that has this capacity for intelligence. But these are that kind of engagement and need to compete at that level, that exists for huge brands. But we will see some more of that kind of trickle down, and I think part of the value prop for the SaaS platforms is they get all the data, right? And they kind of own some of that relationship with the direct customer. I mean, there's obviously there's the value of like a unified payment solution. So like Shop Pay, right? They get to make a lot of money off of that. They get to get a lot of data off of that. Um, and but as they continue to do more and more business, and learn more and more about how people use sites, about how people's all the nuances of people's buying power, and they're aggregating this by the million every day. That's a tough thing to compete with. So as that becomes better and better, and like search results become more and more like perfect, and the merchandising, the tests and the dials and screws all become super refined for the SaaS players, the the value prop that kind of tips the scales in their favor against the value prop of being able to build like a unique customer experience on over here. Because at the end of the day, it's about conversions, and how well you're making money, the money that you should make with the platform that you're on, compared to another platform.
And I'm going to go out on a limb on Shopware. I think the last time I installed it on my local machine was Shopware 5, so a couple of years ago.
Yep. Yep.
And it was very easy to stand up. And I did. Derek Harlick and I gave a talk at Magento Live in 2015. It was called Magento is Easy. And we stood up Magento in 90 minutes and sold stuff to the audience. It was fantastic.
I was there. I
The
remember.
whole thing around that is just to tell people that Magento isn't difficult. It's as difficult as you want it to be. And there was a magic in that. That was on Magento 1, but there was a magic in that you could get something to market quickly. And the whole point was, let's launch this. Let's show them that you can have a store up and running in 90 minutes. Of course, you have to do some planning. You should have a logo and you should think about what you're doing. But the actual execution of getting it live doesn't take very long and you can sell stuff quickly. And I feel like Shopware is there now where you could stand up a store, and if somebody wanted something tomorrow, they could have a store running and operating and a logo put into place, and then you can then iterate on that to your heart's content. And I think that's
Yeah.
part of the magic. Well, that is all the magic in, well, certainly the magic in open source,
Yep.
but in a platform that you have the ability to modify and make better on your own rather than relying on a SaaS somebody to do that for you.
Yeah, and what I so yeah, wholeheartedly agree. And what I really like about Shopware's position in this is that Shopware 6 was completely new code, like starting from zero, new code version of the Shopware idea. So Shopware 5 served its purpose. It's still out there. Plenty of people still running it. The support scope runs through 2024. Um, but Shopware 6, modern take on PHP commerce app built on Symfony. So right, so you can the startup is quick. So yes, we have a number of there are community created solutions out there. So you can use containers, get up and running super fast, check things out. We also have ample documentation to get up and running if you want to place Shopware in your own stack of preference, and then any degree of customization. Like, so customization is where you start to get into the TCO risks, right? So what causes TCO pain for a platform? I mean, there's the OEM, there's the manufacturing vendor, right? How solid are their releases? How well do their releases avoid regressions, right? So that's a little that's like the thing that's out of your control as a mostly out of your control as a user of a platform. The next thing to consider is, okay, what is my customization scope? So I'm going to incorporate a number of like ecosystem apps, so widely available third-party apps, and hopefully the enablement for those teams is good. The they make sure that those vendors can keep are building well to start, and then keeping things up to date. And then there's your local customization scope. And your local customization scope is where your agency comes in, or your in-house team, and or even freelancers, so that freelancing in the Shopware ecosystem is still as viable. So whoever's doing the development, like making sure that they're building well, so that you don't have to deal with, they're not editing the core, and your upgrade path is as smooth as possible. And then the only other piece is making sure that you're with a capable host. And so on the whole, I know anecdotally, and we're again working on another TCO article to really dig into this. Um, Shopware should be cheaper to host, and it should be cheaper to develop, and it should be cheaper to maintain. And cheap has like a couple of dimensions in this realm. Cheap is, in terms of the rates that are being charged, and also the amount of time taken to accomplish tasks. And that's my assertion. Those are the stories that I'm hearing. But I am working to back this up with some numbers and come up with the caveats, because there's always caveats. There's always going to be things that, like, oh, well, if you need this, then probably you want, this SaaS platform, or you want, this other self-hosted platform, whatever the case may be. I'm actually looking to have a proper industry level agreement on how to talk about TCO, because TCO is just like so often is used as snake oil in our business, or
Yeah.
sold as snake oil.
All right. Well, we should have had an agenda, I can see, because we've gone far more than our 10 minutes of conversation that we were going to do. But I have
And
so many topics that we could explore that I would like to talk about in the future. So, but out of time today, I really appreciate you being here. I always give people a chance to do a shameless plug. If you'd like to plug anything, it could be a restaurant in North Carolina, or it could be Shopware. I don't know. Um, but go ahead.
shameless plug. Um, Invest in yourself. Hopefully, you have some time to make time. It can be a bit of a privilege, but make sure you take time for yourself. Make sure you're paying attention to, people who aren't necessarily in the exact same biz as you on social media. People who uh, may not look like you, like whatever differences you can find. Make sure you're adding those voices to whatever you do. You'll find that is a real quick way to learn a lot of things and become a better human being.
That is the best shameless plug that I've ever heard in my entire life. Thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah. All right. Well, Ben Marks, thank you, and we'll definitely have to do this again.
I'd love to, Brent. Give my best to Susan and the pooch.
Will do.
All right.
Magento Creative, partnering with the client to help fulfill their strategic growth, serving the world as an Adobe Gold partner and BigCommerce Elite partner. Magento, the code of commerce. This episode has been sponsored by the partner of choice for technology, infrastructure, and enterprise-level digital solutions, an AWS Select Consulting partner, eWay Corporation. Forward together.